One of the first people in line yesterday was Max Rivlin-Nadler. He is the founder of the New York news organization Hellgate, and he joins us from New York. Max, good morning. You got some rest last night, finally, after 36 hours, you told me.
Yeah, I slept great. It was an unexpected 36 hours of being in line, but Hellgate, which is the worker-owned news outlet I work for, we took shifts. So it wasn't entirely me, but the final kind of 12 hours, it was all me.
You know, having covered this from the courthouse, and, you know, we saw pictures inside, but you really, it's hard to talk about what it feels like to cover this and how much goes into, you know, trying to get into the courtroom. You were the second media outlet in line to get inside. How did that start, and what was the atmosphere like in line?
Yeah, I mean, it was unclear up until basically a day before Trump was going to be arraigned, how many media outlets would be allowed in, what the security would be like. All these details were really in flux. We have a good relationship with the courts administration in New York City. We cover them a lot. So they gave us a heads up that a line would be forming for journalists in New York City before the arraignment. When that line would form, I guess, was kind of up to the media themselves. So I got there at around noon on Monday afternoon and took a look around and said, you know, this seems like as good a spot as any for there to be a line. So I just kind of started waiting. And in classic New Yorker fashion, I stayed there because we love nothing more than being online. Sure enough, a court officer came out and said, actually, you guys should be over there. NBC News quickly swooped over that way. So I became second in line and thus begun our watch for the next 24 hours before we were going to be allowed in on Tuesday.
And we hear there were professional line holders hired by some outlets and that your organization took turns holding the spots and taking shifts because it was such a long run, 36 hours. So who got the night shift and what do they say that was like?
Yeah, I think, you did have these paid line sitters, it's a job creation program. People made money off of this, which is fantastic. But the overnight shift was done by 3 separate writer-editors at Hellgate. They each had a different experience. One really just huddled down and kept to themselves. My coworker, Katie Way, she played dice with a few other people online. People were ordering pizzas, so it was kind of a jovial attitude. And ultimately, as I got my shift started at around 4 a.m. yesterday, that's when the professional corporate reporters began to show up and take over from the line sitters.
And Max, this was a historic day. It was a very serious day. But also very bizarre and circus-like. And, we're showing pictures of you kind of holding up your ticket, sitting in a tent. You know, this is something that you would kind of see if somebody was lining up for maybe iPhones or concert tickets and not really for an arraignment. What did you take away from the experience?
Yeah, I mean, they talked about it in court that obviously if and when this goes to the trial phase, that they might actually have to work out a better plan than just, kind of pure chaos outside of the courthouse. But this is unprecedented area. They've never arraigned a former president before. Secret Service acting on top of, court security, the NYPD being there, an active protest being done outside, obviously allowing free speech. So it was really a chaotic scene. My takeaway from this would be that, it is great to be able to cover these things. The media is part of the story. With Trump, it's definitely always part of the story. And, honestly, I think this kind of worked. If you want to put in the hours and you want to put in the work, you can go and cover the arraignment of a former president from literally 10 feet away, even if you're an independent news outlet that, doesn't necessarily have the resources of a bunch of these larger places. You can cover the biggest story in the world if you put in the work.
And you literally had a front seat. Take us into that courtroom. We were just watching images of Trump as he walked in, very stern look on his face. What can you tell us about what Trump was like during the arraignment?
Yeah, I've covered Trump in person a few times, but usually in more of a campaign setting or a presidential setting. This, he kind of lumbered in very slowly, very stoic. He's extremely made up. His hair was kind of yellow verging on green under the court lights. And he would do these long blinks in the middle of the arraignment itself, because he only said just a few words, including, of course, not guilty. But ultimately, his demeanor was extremely neutral and didn't give much away. His one smirk, his one bit of emotion was when the lawyer, actually speaking on behalf of the media, who wanted, maybe for there to be a better way for us to get access and coordinate when we go to the trial phase, referred to us as professional journalists. And of course, Trump couldn't help it in that moment and gave a little smirk as, he knows the media is looking at him.
And Max, did you hear him yourself say, plead not guilty?
Oh, absolutely. Loud as day. And that's really bizarre, right? Because I cover New York criminal courts normally. In fact, me and my colleague Nick Pinto were in arraignments earlier that day. And the one thing they advise defendants almost at all times is do not speak in court. Obviously, anything you say can and will be used against you. So let your attorney do it. So it was a real departure for Trump, and obviously shows how much he enjoys the limelight here, is to have him actually say it himself during the arraignment, which is, a very formal part of the entire criminal case and criminal justice system. So that was a real departure and quite interesting.
Well, you're definitely part of history now, Max. Thank you for sharing your experience with us.
Thanks for having me.
That was Max Rivlin-Nadler, and he joined us from New York.